So, for those that were here last week, again, can I just get a raise of hands if you were here last week? I know that we've got 93 people in chat, so I know that there's going to be a lot that weren't, but just kind of curious who was here last week. So yeah, last week we were in this ABC company Intranet, which is what we're using as a bit of a demo site to showcase some things to you over the next kind of couple of weeks. But you'll kind of see where we left off with John's suggestion box. Quick links that he had here, the embedded suggestion form, suggestion feedback form that we've got on the screen. So we're just going to kind of continue with this, I think, as we go today. So what are the options available to showcase events? Now, the natural thing that we kind of went looking for was web parts. There's a bunch of different types of web parts that you can use to showcase events, but I think it all very much depends on your use case and what your events are actually doing, because you might have things like physical tickets for an event, like a downloadable QR code or something to get you through a physical door into an event, for example. They might be virtual events. You might have meeting links that you might want to be able to place against these. Like, where are people going to be going to actually get to your events? So we're going to highlight a number of options that you have during this demo today. But what we also need to think about as well as before we even start building this is the sort of processes that we need around our events as well. What I mean by processes is things that happen off the back of events or during the kind of creation of events, when people sign up for events or register for events. What processes do we want to happen? And this could be things as simple as sending out automatic email reminders when somebody's registered for an event, and confirmation emails and all of that sort of thing. But you also might want to think about at the end of an event, what does somebody want to achieve or receive? They might want a certificate of attendance or some form of certification to say that they've completed some training. So again, this is all things you got to think about when it comes to actually the whole event creation side of events inside of your business. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you the first web part on my list, and this is going to be the events web part. Now, you've seen me before how I get access to the web parts, and that is by editing one of the pages. So here at the moment, I'm on my ABC company intranet. I'm just going to go ahead and click edit, and this takes me into the edit view for my page. And if you remember, if we want to add a web part, we can hover over any of these sections between these web parts that already exist, and you get this little plus icon here. It says add a new web part in column 1, which is because I only have one column in here. So what I'm going to do, instead of searching for events, I'm actually just going to scroll down, and you can see that we have a category here called news, people, and events. And there's a few different options that we have in here. And I know a couple of these John will probably be exploring next week as part of the contact stuff, which is this organization chart, and people, which are two of the important ones. But today, obviously, we're looking at events. So let's have a look at what events that we have inside of here. So we've got a countdown timer, which I'll get to in a second. We have events and we have group calendar. So I'm going to start off with the events web part. Now, when I click this, you can see that it's just added underneath here, which is fine. You can see that we've got a new web part here, and we've got the option to add a title. So I could say that we could say this is going to be training events, and this could be any sort of event category you like, really. You can see that there is no upcoming events at the moment. These are all kind of what I'm going to call placeholder events that get created as part of this this web part. So I'm just going to click out of this for now, and I'm just going to republish this. We're going to come back to it in a second. So I've republished it. We can see the web part here now, and this is an interactive web part. You can click into each of these. Obviously, these 3 don't actually exist; they're just placeholders. But when events are here, you can click into these and see the details of the event. But I just want to quickly highlight what's happening behind the scenes once we create this events web part. Now, by default, this won't exist. So this, like I say, this only exists once you've created the web part. But what happens is behind the scenes under your site contents, I'm just going to click my site contents in my navigation. If you don't see it there, then under the settings, you'll find site contents on the right-hand side. But what will happen is you'll see that I've got this new list created here, and it's of type events list. So it's very different actually to what we have from a normal list. You can see the type here for our other normal style lists that, for example, John created last week. Internet suggestion box, for example, is of type list. The events is of type event list. And this gets created once you create that that events web part. Now I'm just going to quickly click into this, and you'll notice that it does take you to that kind of classic SharePoint look. Now, I've not seen any news on whether they're kind of bringing this to the modern view inside of SharePoint. I don't know if anyone's got any insight about that, because I don't really like working in the classic view. It's a bit confusing for me, especially since I've only really been in this space for a few years and kind of evolved around the kind of modern view that we've kind of been used to over the last couple of years. But inside of here, you can see your site navigation down the side, and we'll ignore some of this. Is some of the stuff that we did the other week. But essentially, we have a list, and this is basically in the format of a calendar at the moment. Now, if I click the events tab at the browse tab at the top, I'm just trying to find where that's displayed to. Yep, sorry, the calendar tab at the top. We can change the view of this in the back end of how it looks at the moment. We're in the calendar view. We can also view more of a list view by coming to the all events as well. This would be almost kind of your classic SharePoint list view. But I'm not going to create any events in here because, like I say, I don't like this view at all. It's a little bit confusing to work with for me. But whilst I'm here, I just want to point out some of the settings that you do have. So you can create alerts specifically for the person who has created the event whenever events change. And this is something that I was testing out, because I know that, for example, I might create an event and John is likely to go in there and update some descriptions, or maybe he'll readjust the time, because as you've already seen, we get our times mixed up a lot with UTC and GMT. So John might go in there and change, for example, the start time or end time for an event. And as the creator of the event, I'd like to be notified about that. So you can manage your alerts for events, and I'm not going to go into this now, but when you have events specifically in here, you can set up event-specific alerts. So, for example, I can set up an event that says, if John changes the date and time for an event, send me an email or an SMS, and I'll receive that whenever he goes in there and makes a change. So that's just to kind of point out where your events sit in the back end, and that is, like I say, under the site contents. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just go in and show you the settings that are available inside of this web part. So if we set the web part and we press edit, we can see that we have a bunch of settings along the right hand side for this specific web part. Now, one great thing that you can do with events is, in fact, what I will just quickly mention is, back on that events list that I was just showing you, that sits within your SharePoint site. It's not a kind of global org area for all of your events to go in. So, like I said, they sit specifically on your on the site that you created it in. However, on this web part, you can surface events from all sites that exist. So, for example, here on the source on the right hand side, you can see by default we've got events that the events list that is on this site. We can also do this site in general. So, for example, if you have more than one events list, which you can create, then you can say that you would like all of the events on this site, rather than just the events list. It's referring to events list there because that is the name of our events list. You can also surface events based on your actual entire site collection as well. So again, we're not going to go into the site collection side of it because we've not spoken about that at all during these weekly digests, but that's an option as well. And you can also just bring in all events from all SharePoint sites that you have. So one thing that you can do with here as well is you can categorize. So this will become a little bit more clearer once I create an event, which I'll do in just a second. But you can filter events based on a category that is either predefined for you or one that you can specify as well. So there's a bunch of filtering options here. Say the category, we can filter by date range as well. And we've got a few different layout options. We've got film strip, which gives us that kind of nice image, or we've got the compact one, which is useful if you have probably like a lot more events, similar to that sort of that big view or the mega menu that we were looking at. If you've got a few options, then it's probably better to go with something like the film strip. If you've got quite a lot of options, then you kind of want to compact it down a little bit, fit more on the page, take up more of that real estate that you have. So I'm just going to quickly republish and just show you quickly how that category filtering works. So I'm going to come over here to add event, and this is directly from the events web part that we have. So we have typical things which you're probably used to for an event. We obviously need to know when it starts, when it finishes. We've got an option here to select whether it's an all-day event. We can specify the location of a place. For example, I could type in my local postcode, and it gives me a list of results based on a big search, which is nice. Or we can also specify our own values in here. So I can also just say that this is just an online event, and we can just leave that. And what that'll do is it will just populate that inside of the where you can enter a online meeting link. So let's say, for example, you have an associated Teams meeting with this event. You could go ahead and pop a link into there. So just for speed, because I don't have an event set up today, I will just use Google, and I can just say that is the label that's going to be on there. So I can say that's a join now. And you can see that we get some predefined categories as well. And again, this gives you some ideas of some of the things that you can use events for. So we could celebrate people's birthdays. Perhaps John's been with us for maybe 3 years or 4 years, however long he's been with us now. We want to kind of, I think the word is commemorate that. I always get confused with
have a massive party. That's
have
what
a massive
after,
party.
Connor. Have a massive party.
Or a get together. We could have a get together.
Oh, a little get together, a soiree.
But yeah, we got some categories out of the box as well, and we can also define our own categories as well. So we could say that this might be let's call this training for now. We could add that as a category, and that will just add a new item to that list. One thing that I often miss out is obviously having the title up at the top. It's not in a little box underneath. You actually have to put this in, similar to the way you would create SharePoint web pages as well. So I could say that this is going to be our SharePoint Intranet training session, and this is going to be, I'm going to be happy just to leave the dates and times. We'll just put this as tomorrow just so we can see it on a calendar. And we'll leave that as an hour session. We can add some blurb as well. Something in there just so we can see it. And we can also manually add participants to this event, people that we know that we actually want to show up. So one thing that I could do in here is I could actually go and find John, and we can just go and add him as an event participant as well. So one thing just to bear in mind as well, which is a little bit hidden, is you can also add a background image to this as well. Up in the top left, I'm just going to go grab a stock image, and we'll go with that. That looks nice. And once that you're happy with that event, we can just go ahead and press save. So just remember that we chose the category as training for this one. I go back and show those filtering options. So this is how the event will look to people that click on this event and that actually see this. So one thing that you do get using this events list, this events web part, is the ability to add to your calendar. So when I click this, what you see up in the top right is you can see a bunch of tests that I've done, but you see what you get is an ICS, which is a downloadable, which basically imports into your Outlook calendar or your or any of the calendar services that you might want to use. So people can easily get this in their calendars, which is probably one of the best features of having this this events web part inside of here. And then obviously you've got the join now link as well, which people can click, and this opens up obviously Google. This would take them, in my case to Google. In many other cases, this would hopefully take them to whichever meeting link that you place in here. For example, if you've preset up a meeting to go alongside this. So I'm just going to go back to see all events. In fact, which is another view that you have here, which is another way to filter events that exist inside of your list. I want to go back slowly to my home page, and hopefully, if I give this a quick refresh, we should see this inside of here. And I feel like I've already filtered my my training events web part in here. Okay, so if I go back to events list and then events list on this site, you can see there that my training session is in here. Again, we've got that little add to calendar button as well. We can see that it's an online event. We can see all the details about the event as well. We can see that my category here is also training. Now this worked before. I feel like it was not going to work this time. But if I, for example, change this to all sites, and I go type in training, and it doesn't seem to be wanting to work today. This worked earlier.
You were nailed by the demo gods last time as well, weren't you, Connor? It's the challenge with playing around with these things and then coming back to it to do the demo. We don't quite always register what we've just tweaked.
Just going to see if that works. So yeah, that doesn't seem to be wanting to work today, which it worked this morning when I was running through these tests. But essentially what should be happening there is it should be surfacing all events from all sites that exist, and then I can type in a category to filter out these events by, and what you would see there is that single event appearing in here, because my category would, for example, be training, but that doesn't want to appear in here. So I will just leave it on the events list on the site. I'm not sure whether there's just a bit of a delay in updating all of that information, which is a little bit annoying for today, but yeah, apparently
there you go. Yeah, SharePoint plain fun. Interesting one that Michelle's commented on as well. I think that's a really good point, is there will be a degree of personalization. So if you're setting up filters for people to show events on a site based upon your parameters, and people have got different time zones and all sorts, that could just create some challenges, couldn't it? Because there's things happening in the context of this event web part, which it could just be creating some oddities.
So yeah, one thing to bear in mind, we've seen this again with the kind of cross between the Power Platform and SharePoint, is that your time zone for SharePoint is stored in your SharePoint site, and I'll quickly just show you where that is for those that are. I wonder if we go to site information and then go view all site settings. If I can remember where this is, like I say, I don't like the classic view. But I'm looking at regional settings. There you go. And this is where we can change the time zone and the locale specifically for our events as well. So if we change this, for example, to a different locale, it will choose the time zone that is appropriate for it as well. And again, you can choose the actual specific time zone directly from this list here as well. So that's where you would go to change these settings. Now it'd be really nice if this was going to work to show the filtering, but essentially that filtering should work. You see I had a bit of a problem there. It came up that there's something that went wrong, but we'll just move on from that. So that's essentially where your events sit. They sit within inside its own list. Essentially, it's a bit of a customized list, but its own list within your SharePoint site. And like I say, you've got options when you click into these events to, for example, add joining links, and more importantly, the ability to add to your calendar. Now, before I move on to a bit more of a customized option, the other thing that I would like to show is the ability to add countdown timers or countdowns to. It could be a number of things, and in my case, I'm going to use this for doing a countdown to a specific event. Now, as I showed you when I created the web parts, if I go to edit, and let's go and add a web part, and we do a search for countdown. I'm just going to go ahead and add this countdown timer to my site. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the countdown timer and your events list aren't associated with each other in any way. Now, I'd love to know if there is a way of doing it. I've looked high and low for a way of doing it, because I think that would be a really nice option to say, right, I've just created this an event. let's just tie it to an events countdown timer, and the timer would just work. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. You kind of have to do a bit of pre-configuring to set this up. But essentially, you can add countdown timers to do a number of things, and for me, it's about kind of highlighting the importance of an event. For example, you've just seen that I've created a little training session for me and John to attend tomorrow morning. But let's say, for example, me and John have got 15 training sessions or training events that we'd like to attend over the next kind of couple of weeks, but we say one of those is really important. We know it's going to really kind of help the business grow. We're going to learn a lot of stuff, which is going to be able to help us make some decisions on how we maybe direct our training and all of that sort of thing. I would use a countdown timer to kind of highlight the importance of that event. So it is a really kind of a great option for being able to pin events, and again, not just events, but other aspects of things that might be coming up in the future. So again, we have a few controls. We can edit some things directly on this web part. I could say that this is going to be some Power Apps training session. I could say it's going to be for all staff to attend. And again, you can add a description here. I'm not going to bother just for the sake of speed. If we go and edit this web part, again, we can say when this countdown timer is going to show time for. So we could say that this might be next month, for example. So we could say May the 8th, which for anyone that doesn't know is when Jerry's Intranet certification program actually starts. But we're going to say May the 8th for this one, and you can see that's automatically adjusted the date and time or the timer of this countdown accordingly. And we can choose specifically if we want to be a little less kind of enforceable about it. We can say that we want to show how many days it's going to be. We've got a bunch of different options there as well. We can also add a call to action as well. Now, call to action is essentially excuse me, call to action is actually an action that somebody can do off the back of something else. So in this case, we've got a timer on the screen. Maybe we want our staff to register for the event or mark that they'll be attending or of some sort. What we can do here is we can add some call to action text, which would be the text that appears into the button. So I could say book my seat, for example. And again, we could add a link here. Now, I don't have a link to anything specific, but again, just for the sake of demoing this, we'll go to Bing, because we don't want to give Google more love than Bing today. And again, we can add things like background images as well. The great thing I like about SharePoint as well is when it comes to adding images to things like events and web pages and backgrounds and all that, is we have the ability to do web searches for images and also get stock images as well. So we don't have to worry about creating them. Again, if you really kind of want to go and dig into that process, then you want to keep things on brand, you can go and create your own images and upload them here as well. But we'll just go ahead and see what we get for Power Apps if we type that in. Of course, we don't get anything. Let's do a search in the web search.
Why would they put the Power Platform anywhere near a Microsoft product? That would be illogical, right?
There we go.
There you go. Lovely.
Power Apps. Probably not the image that I would have chosen, but again, we've got some controls over how that appears as well. So we can set the overlay, make that stand out a little bit more in the background there.
Nice.
So let's go ahead and republish that. And you can see this is how it would appear to people that are viewing the page. Now, just bear in mind as well that I am using a one-column layout for this. So again, it depends on the needs of your intranet page or homepage, whichever page you're working on or would like this on. It depends on the needs of that and how you display it. You might want to have a two-column layout with a sidebar, and that's maybe where you want to put some of the maybe a countdown to your latest event. Maybe you want a list of all of your other events down the side, and maybe you've got more important information to show on the left. Again, it's all down to personal preference and what I went back and said couple of weeks ago, and it's about how people are using your site. It depends on how you kind of want to shape it up in terms of layout and where things are placed on your screen. So I know that we've got about 10 minutes of demo left. So what I do want to show is the last part of this demo, and that is more of a customized options. So You saw last week how John created a suggestion box using a Microsoft list or a SharePoint list, if you like, that sits inside of SharePoint. And then he was using obviously the new forms to interact with that list. But the power of lists goes far beyond what you may think. You can do a lot with lists, and we often use lists as almost a framework, if you like, for a lot of the solutions that we build in the Power Platform, because you do have a lot of flexibility with them. You've got the options to add columns that might be more complex than just adding rows, for example, in an Excel spreadsheet. So you do have much more flexibility inside of SharePoint lists. So what I'm going to show you is a list that here's one I've done earlier, which is my event itinerary. Now, this probably looks a little bit complex for people that haven't experienced lists before, but I'm telling you now, I created this in about 3 minutes. It was really simple to do. So this is a Microsoft list that now sits inside of my SharePoint site. Now, again, I'll show you where that sits. So under site contents, once I've created my list, we can see this here as an event itinerary. Notice this is just a list, and that's because I've used the new list button to create that. So the way you do that is you come to new and you select list. Now it should be creating me or give me a menu to create a list, which it doesn't seem to be doing. So I'll try it from my home page. There we go. So again, we have the ability to create a new list. Now, again, I could build this from scratch. But I was interested to see what some of these templates give us. Now I was looking through the templates, seeing if there was anything that would be ideal for events, and obviously Microsoft thought about that, and there is, and this is this event itinerary here. Now if I click on this, you can see all of the columns that are going to be included as part of this list when it gets created. And this has all been constructed for you. You don't get any of the information that sits in this list. You have to create that yourself, which is understandable because you don't want events that you don't want any control over. But what you do get is obviously the session name. You get some things that might or might not be useful to you, such as the session code, the session type, description. We can say who the speakers are, start date and end time, which is obviously very important for events. One thing that I liked about this one as well is it had a duration on there, and this was an automatic calculated column that basically calculates the duration of the event based on the start time and end time. You don't have to specify that. You can say the capacity as well. For example, you've only got 500 seats in a conference room or something. You can specify that here on a per event basis. You can specify the location, you can add notes and all of that sort of stuff. So what I did is I just used this template. Now I'm not going to go and create this again because I already have it over here with some of my own values in, and you can see that I've kind of used this template to kind of bring to light some of the events that are happening at Intranet Insights in 2 weeks' time. But essentially, that's what I kind of went and tried to use this for. So when I went and created a new item, I was given all of this information. So we can create, again, session name, similar to the way that we can in events. I can add the session code. We've got some categories for session types straight out of the box. And again, we can add to these. We can add new categories in here. We can also add speakers. Now, one thing to bear in mind if you're doing this sort of method is out of the box, this speakers column is a user/person field, which means that you can only actually put internal people into here. So if I was doing this for our use case, then I would use probably like a single line of text or something that I can just put a name in and then do something with later inside of Power Automate, for example. You start, end time, and your capacity as well in here, and that's how I basically went and created these. So just before I get into implementing this, I mean, there's some reasons why you would want to you'd want to kind of create this list from scratch, and that is if you have processes that you want to create where you need to add custom fields, custom columns. So what I showed you at the beginning, where you have that ability to add events, you've got no real control over adding extra columns in there that might be useful to you. That list is a little bit kind of locked away in terms of what you can add, what information and attributes you can add to it. Whereas with the list, anyone who's used list before knows that you can just come in here and you can add columns. Now, a common use case for us would be, well, this is how we're going to track our Intranet Insights event that's coming up. We need to know whether we've received the videos from our speakers that produce the content for us. So I might come in here, for example, and add a yes or no field. and I might call this video received. And we could say that the default value is going to be no, because we know that we create the events, then we wait for the speaker to send us the session, so we know that they haven't sent us the session straight away. And we can just go ahead and click save. And now we have extra columns, extra attributes that we can apply to this. So again, that's just highlighting why lists could be a better option for you as well. So just so I can show you how this sits in terms of how this might look on our homepage, I can come over to home, and what I'll do is I'm just going to go and edit, and we're going to add a new web part in here. I'm just going to find my little plus icon. And for this one, because we know that it's created as a list, we're going to search for list. And you can see here that we have a list web part in here as well. So you can see that we have a list of lists. So what a bit of a tongue twister. A list of lists that exist on our SharePoint site. You can see the one that John created last week, the Internet suggestion box. But we also have our event itinerary in here. Notice that we don't see any of the other events that we created using this previous one. And again, it's because that's a little bit locked away in the kind of back end of SharePoint. So I'm going to click event itinerary, and you can see here that we have our list. And again, we've got control over the things that we can do in here. So I can get rid of the command bar, which is the ability to edit this list and create new items if we just want this to be a bit more of a display only area. And again, we can change things like how this fits on the page. If I only want to show, for example, 5 items maximum, I can do that and make that a little bit smaller. But I like to kind of keep this as auto size. It gives us the best kind of view, in my opinion. And we've just got an open mic, I think. So yeah, the other thing that I want to show is the views as well. So when you create, when I created this list using that template, it gave us 3 views out of the box, or 2 views out of the box, and that's the grid view and the list view as well. So that's the list view, and we have the grid view, which looks slightly different. So if you want to add more views to this, which is another little thing which I'll show, is that we can go back to our event itinerary list. If it wants to load. SharePoint's been a little bit odd today. And what I can do is add a new view. So you can see here's my list of views up at the top here. I could come and add a new view. And we've got a number of options. We could add a calendar view. And we could say the default layout might be month. And I can say that I want the start date to be the start date and time, which is the end date and time on the calendar. And we'll give this call this the calendar view. And what these 2 times are based on is the start date and time for the columns that exist inside of our events. And here you can see that we have our calendar view, which is, if I go in here, you can see all of my events that are happening on the 24th, which is Intranet Insights. And then it's simply just a case of coming back to our homepage now that view's been created and editing this web part. Sure the web part is chosen, select edit web part. We can go and change that to be our calendar view inside of here as well. And that's how you could potentially bring another way of viewing and creating categories in here. So the last thing I do want to show before I wrap up today is one of the important things that you might want that will maybe help you make a decision whether you want to use the kind of inbuilt events calendar versus this kind of customized list. And it might be that you might want to use both of these, and there'll be ways inside of things like Power Automate that you can tie both of these together and perform processes that kind of sit around them. But that is the ability to kind of, like I say, perform some form of processing against a specific event. So the way I'm going to do this is inside of Power Automate. Now, again, just while I'm loading into Power Automate, can I just get a raise of hands or a yes in chat if you've used Power Automate before? I know this is not something we've spoken about as part of our Discover SharePoint series. Just want to see how much people know about Power Automate. Awesome. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into Create. So it seems we've got quite a few that do know SharePoint, that do know Power Automate. And I'm going to show you kind of how you can tie into both of these. Now, one of them is a little bit more hidden away than the other. So just for the sake of speed, I'm just going to create an more automated cloud flow, which is going to basically trigger when something happens inside of our organization as part of these triggers that we have here. And I'm going to say that when an item is created. Now, remember me saying that one was an events list and one was a list. Now, behind the scenes, technically they are both lists, and you can access both of them from within Power Automate. So I'm going to select into my trigger here, and it's going to ask for a site name, and I'm just going to go ahead and select my ABC company intranet. And if we look inside of the list name, we can see that we have those three lists that we had, the event itinerary, but we're not seeing anything to do with the events of the events list, if you like, that we have in here. Now, this does exist. You just kind of have to input it manually to get to it. So again, if you want to find out how what it's called, just go to site contents. We look for our events list under the type, and we can see that we've called this events, or that's what it's been named as by default. And also just bear in mind that you can tell the difference because there is a slightly different icon between a normal list and our events list here as well. Not sure if you guys can see that. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm typing that in exactly how it's written there inside of a custom value, making sure I'm using the correct capitalization as well. And then we could do like a number of things based off of this. So for example, I could send an email whenever a new item is, or a new event is created inside of our main events list. Now you could do a number of things. The possibilities to do things in Power Automate are pretty much endless. So again, it all depends on your process. But again, one of the common things that I like to do is if there's a new event that ends up in that list, I might want to send an email, and I'll be able to send this, for example, to myself. And I'm not going to completely configure this, but what will happen is when you look into the dynamic content of your actions, you can see that we have all of that information against the events that exist. So we can access things like, for example, who the attendees might be for this specific event. So we could send out, I don't know, maybe a weekly update of attendees that have attended between the specific dates, or have registered between the specific dates. You can do all of that sort of stuff inside of here. But again, that's how you access this side of the events list from within Power Automate. Now, I'm not going to do the same for the event itinerary because that's just a normal list, and for those that have used Power Automate, it's pretty much the same, but you can see that list existed in there. But yeah, I think that's kind of my introduction, if you like, to events inside of SharePoint. And yeah, I'm not sure if I've missed out anything from chat. I've been kind of
I think you caused some really good thoughts there and some really good conversation. Thank you, Connor, first and foremost. And very interesting is you got towards the end there, that workaround to a degree, the fact that the events list, let's just call it that style list, isn't exposed by default in Power Automate, kind of stops you. But I love that workaround you found. You can get to it, so you can do all that goodness in Power Automate. And people, I don't know if you've spotted it, been asking about, could you expose a list with a button to click RSVP, and showing what you did that calendar view with a JSON column. You absolutely couldn't you? We just haven't had time to show that today.
Yeah, one really cool thing as well is, like I say, there's multiple approaches to surfacing the kind of visual aspect of your list as well. And I know that I was playing around with things earlier today, where essentially you could almost pretty much design this sort of view inside of your normal list by kind of creating the I think it was the grid layout rather than the calendars. When I went and created my view in here, and I went to for example the calendar view, you can also create a gallery view as well, which looks it begins to look a little bit more like that kind of view that you were seeing. And you can do things in here like edit the what's called the JSON, which is how it's kind of displayed and viewed inside of this view. So you could essentially, if you know JSON, and willing to put in the time to kind of work around that, and I'm pretty sure ChatGPT would give you a good response if you asked it to try and design something for you, that you can almost do the same thing. You can add images into here. You can format things. You could perhaps add a button in here as well that might do something specific. But again, just to kind of reiterate, is it might be a case that you use both of these options for the same thing. For example, maybe you're happy with the way that the events calendar looks on here, and you like the way that you can filter nice and easily. It doesn't take much for anyone to really kind of come in here and do that. But let's say, for example, you did want processes. You could create Power Automate flows that perhaps when a new event gets created, like you've just seen inside of here, instead of sending an email, for example, I might add a new item to my other list, my custom list that I created, which is my list that does have maybe those extra columns where I want to track whether we've received videos, and or maybe there's other processes that you might have around your events. But you can kind of bring all of these kind of pieces together to build quite full and complex solutions that kind of work for you.